Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Before we get started, I just want to let you guys know that this week's episode is brought to you by my new online course, Become a Superhuman. And yes, it sounds exactly like the title of the podcast, but this is actually an online course where we go into the various aspects of improving your health, specifically your endocrine health. More specifically, getting your testosterone up to the optimal levels. Now, whether you're a male or a female, as we've learned in numerous episodes of the show, testosterone is the ultimate feel-good motivation, improved health, improved fitness, improved body composition, super drug. Okay, so everything from your mood to your recovery time and everything in between is affected by your body's endocrine health. And what my team and I have done is we've actually taken years of my own self-experimentation, years of research, every possible literature and study we could find, and we've condensed it into a simple 3 to 4 hour program that you can follow along and make simple, safe, and easy adjustments to your lifestyle to improve your endocrine health. Now, as listeners of this podcast, you can get a very special discount by visiting jle.vi/T. That's jle.vi, just like my name, /T for testosterone. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to today's show. You guys, this week we are joined by an Australian endurance athlete and motivational speaker named Luke Tyburski. Luke is the subject of a new documentary called The Ultra-Triathloner, which documents his absolutely grueling journey towards completing the notorious Morocco to Monaco, a 2,000 kilometer, 12-day taste of hell on earth. Now, to put that into perspective, the ultimate triathlon is the equivalent of swimming 500 laps in a 50-meter pool, then cycling the length of Britain, and then running a staggering 14 marathons. And that's all done in less than 2 weeks. So obviously, very clearly a superhuman. In this episode, I wanted to gain some insight, not just into Luke's physical performance and training regimen, but also into what goes on in the mind of a person who willingly subjects himself to such grueling conditions. How does he do it? Why? And ultimately, what can we learn from it? So throughout the episode, you'll see that we talk about endurance, we talk about goal setting, we talk about tenacity and grit, and ultimately we talk about how you too can learn to overcome even the toughest of limitations. Luke shares how he's been able to train himself to push way past the breaking point. And I think there are a ton of really great takeaways that are sure to inspire you and hopefully will even motivate you. So now, without any further ado, let me present to you Mr. Luke Tyburski. Mr. Luke Tyburski, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me on.
An absolute pleasure, man. Absolute pleasure. I'm really excited to hear about everything you've been up to and exactly how you've been up to it. So why don't we start out, Luke? Tell us a bit about your background. I understand that you've always been an athlete, albeit not such an extreme one. Tell me about that.
Yeah, like we all do, I've got a bit of an interesting journey. So I'm an Australian and I live in London at the moment, and I've been here for a while, but I actually grew up as a soccer player in Oz. That's all I ever wanted to do as a kid. I just wanted to play professional soccer around the world, do all this stuff. It was a big dream of mine as a little kid from as far back as about 5, I think I can remember. So I bounced around in Australia. I wasn't the best athlete growing up in my teenage years, but through a combination of working really hard by myself without being pushed by my parents, just for the pure fact that I wanted to continually be better and try and make the team, because I was never picked for like the local representative team. So all my friends were, and I wanted to play with my friends and go away on these trips in school holidays. So I constantly worked at it most afternoons and some mornings and things like this. And at the age of about 15, I grew into my body. I had a bit of a growth spurt and I sort of started to develop as an adolescent. And then I think it was the years of this really hard work of building up these foundations as a soccer player. I started to make some representative teams and get noticed on a national level. And I moved out of home when I was 16 to play soccer in Sydney, and I grew up about 3.5 hours away. And then I played sort of at the highest level in the junior ranks in Australia and got to a point where the restructuring of the national competition was going to happen in 12 months' time. And at that time, I was 19, 20, and the top league was going to basically be non-existent for about 3 years until they restructured it with financially and made it smaller, full-time, professional, all this type of stuff. So I thought, I'm 20 years of age. Do I want to play in sort of a lower competition at this age to try and develop myself as an athlete? And I made a decision to actually go to America and go to a college over there. And I bounced around between a couple of colleges in Kentucky. I went to a small NAIA school called Brescia University, and then went over to Oklahoma at a school called Southern Nazarene University. And I had a great time. I learned a lot about different cultures, obviously, in those two parts of the US. And I played with a lot of foreigners, which is really cool because I learned a lot about people from different parts of the world. And I think that's really helped me on my journey to understand just a bit more about life, to be honest. And then I played in sort of the lower professional ranks in Orlando, New Orleans, and San Francisco. So I bounced around a lot, and I was a bit of a journeyman just to try and find my spot in the world of professional soccer. And by no means at this stage, I was around 20, 23, 24. I knew I was never going to play at the absolute highest level, like in the English Premier League. I just knew I wasn't good enough. But I knew I was good enough to try and make a living from playing this sport that I loved and grew up with. So I was okay with that. It was like basically I was bouncing around the world trying to get a contract to get paid normal money, like just enough to pay the rent, feed myself, but have this awesome journey in my 20s, right? And hopefully if I get it a little bit lucky and I'm in the right place at the right time and impress the right people, a little bit of financial stability into the future. And I went over to England when must have been the first time was like 24 and tried out for a few clubs there. I got a few short-term deals, had an introduction to the game, the English game, very, very different to the US and Australia.
Oh, really?
And the culture's very different too. It's very... In the leagues that I was playing, we're talking like the 3rd and 4th division, which sounds quite low, but in the grand scheme of things, there's clubs in the 6th division in England that are professional, full-time professional. So I was doing okay, and it's a very working-class sport in the lower leagues. And, I grew up in a working-class family, so I thought I could relate to that. But the English culture in those lower leagues and the mentality of that, I didn't really click because I grew up in Australia where sport was massive, and we were, one of the leaders in sport development, sport psychology, sport nutrition, sport training techniques. And I felt like I was going back in time. It was a bit of a battle for me to try and find my place in the lower leagues of English soccer. I ended up going back to America for a season, played in New Orleans, which was great. And then through random friends who I'd met and phone calls, I ended up in Belgium. So I played out there in the lower leagues for a season, which was really cool. I learnt French. I had exposed to a completely new culture and a way of living. I loved it. I embraced it, and it was fantastic. And then I ended up going back to the UK to try and further my career. I just had a great season playing in Europe. Things were moving forward. And then I started what was going to be a 3-year battle with non-stop injuries, and I really struggled on many different levels of life.
Wow. So I understand that during this time and also a little bit before, you suffered as well with some pretty serious depression. Was this spurred on by the injuries, or was it something kind of biological? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's something that I like to coin the phrase, I suffered in silence for a very long time. But during this 3 years between 25 and 28, which is a massive shifting point in my life, and I'm now 33, so, sort of not that long ago. But I just constantly had these injuries. And when I was in London, I sourced out some of the best sort of physical therapists and sports physicians and physios and doctors and things like this. So I had a great medical team around me, the people who I would see, and I just kept breaking down. And the depression was there, quite prominent, but I didn't realize what it was. I just thought I was a little bit down. I was a little bit upset, a little bit sad because I was injured and I couldn't play this game. And then things sort of escalated quite quickly in terms of if I didn't have any face-to-face time with anyone. So on the side, because I wasn't paid to playing soccer, I did a little bit of coaching. So I was training other athletes and people and things like this because I have an exercise science degree and I've always been fascinated with performance, nutrition and things like this. So that's how I was trying to pay the bills. And I was struggling to get out of bed. I couldn't even leave my room at times. And I would fake I was living with a few friends, and I would say to everybody in the morning, "I'll see you guys, I'm going out." And I'd go to the front door, open it, close it, quietly shuffle back into my bedroom and close the door and pretend I've left for the day, and I would just stay in bed all day. And I just put this down to I'm injured, I'm a little bit down and upset, and I didn't realize until probably 18 months, 2 years after this all started, that this is not right. As a bubbly guy, I'm very personable, I love chatting, I love being around people. I like my alone time, but I love being around people. That's what it's all about for me, about having a community. I couldn't face anyone, let alone like strangers, let alone people I knew. So I just locked myself inside my own head. And it got to a point where I was like, I can't keep doing this. So I sought out some help and I went to see a therapist. And I wasn't looking for a label and I wasn't looking for someone to say, this is what you have, so this is what you do to fix it. I was looking for some sort of understanding. And when I sat down with this woman and started talking to her and she said, "Why are you here?" and went through all this, she said, "Have you ever thought about depression?" And I thought, what do you mean? She goes, "Ever thought about if you have depression?" And I was like, "Well, no, I'm just a bit upset because of all these injuries." And she just, dropped a few thoughts and I was talking as I was thinking and it clicked. And she's like, "Luke, you have clinical depression." And so I went, right, okay, this actually makes sense. And as I said, it wasn't about putting a label on it. It was just about understanding why I was feeling like this and why I was thinking. Because at some of the worst times, like I was having suicidal thoughts, I was withdrawing from the world, from society, and I was in a pretty dark place at times. And it started to make sense. And then we went back to, as you do in therapy, you go back to your childhood. And there were instances that I brought up with this woman that's just like, yeah, you've suffered this throughout your entire life. Like, for an example, some days I would come home from school and just feel really flat and really down, and I'd say to my parents, "Oh, I'm going to go out the back to play," as you did as a kid in Australia, climb trees, swim in the pool, or whatever. And I would go into the corner of the backyard where my parents couldn't see me from the back window and just lay down and curl up and just, for an hour, or if I heard the back sliding door open, and just was in like this sort of cocoon state. And there was instances like that happened throughout my life. And so I realized I was dealing with this my entire life, but I just didn't really know what it was. And it was not until I had started therapy with this woman that she said, "This is something that you've been suffering from for a very long time. It's just taken this massive shift that I've been injured and I haven't been able to live my life at all to recognize it and have her diagnose it."
Wow. So how did you manage to overcome it?
I threw myself into a world of ultra endurance sports.
Wow. Okay. So let's go right into that then. The big question here, at some point in this journey, which up until this point has been a pretty tough one. I mean, a lot of suffering that you shared. You decide to solve all this suffering by running your first race, but you decide to run not just any race, but a 250 kilometer marathon des Sables. Explain that decision to me.
So I got to a point where after 3 years of injuries, like a light switch, I just went, I've had enough. I was content. I had no regrets, which is why I hung on for like 3 years of non-stop injuries. I had my girlfriend at the time. I had my family and friends going, maybe your body's telling you something. And I'm like, no, I'm not ready. I'm going to be retired for a very long time. I want to have no regrets. And then this one day I tore a calf muscle, nothing major, light switch goes off. I'm content with what I've achieved. I'm done now. I'm 28 years of age. I'm hobbling home. I'm icing my calf. I'm thinking, holy crap, what am I going to do with the rest of my life?
Wow.
And at this moment, I start searching online, and my friends in Australia were getting into marathons at the time, and I hated running. I'd never done a 10K before. I'd never done a race. I thought people that did half marathons were crazy. People that did marathons were just mad. And I remember my friend telling me about this race through the desert. Now, this is the bit of my life. Like, I've done a lot of self-work over especially the last sort of 8 years, or 6 years, 6, 7 years. And this is the thing that I still don't quite understand, that I went from not liking running, my friend started running, and looking for this race that a friend of mine told me about, 6 marathons, 7 days through the Sahara Desert, carrying everything in your backpack. It dropped into my head, and I know the reason I signed up to it was because I wanted to escape from life, because the life I was living sucked. Because I was battling depression, I couldn't do the sport I wanted to do anymore. I decided to retire. It was just an escape from having to deal with what I'm going to do now as a 28-year-old with my whole life in front of me. So it was all about escape from life. Why I thought about it and why I actually looked it up, I'm still not sure about that. So with 6 months before the start of the race, I called them up and said, do you have any spots? And I knew nothing about this race. And they said, if you pay a deposit today, there's a few people that just pulled out, you can have a spot. And this race is not cheap. And I literally drained my small savings account of the couple of £1,000 that I had to pay for this race. So I went all in, literally. And the next 6 months was all about focusing my energy, my entire life, on preparing for the Marathon des Sables, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, and also from a logistical point of view, and also the kit, because I never ran before, let alone carried everything I needed for a whole week in my backpack.
Wow.
So I shifted going all in into my soccer career to going all in into the Marathon des Sables. So when everyone asks me, oh, now what are you doing? You're not playing soccer. I said, well, I'm doing the Marathon des Sables. And people go, wow, that's massive. So they didn't ask me what's next. And that's the real reason that I sort of signed up to the race. But how that came into my head, I'm still not sure.
My God, that's crazy. So the next question I wanted to ask is why, but it sounds like you don't really know why you decided to run the thing. But why did you decide to go through with it? I mean, I imagine the next 20, 30 minutes of our conversation are going to be about the absolute physical hell that you've gone through. So let's first get an understanding of like what drove you during that time. Were you just running away from depression, or you were looking for purpose and cause? I mean, can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, on reflection over the years, I've come to understand my decisions a lot more. At the time, like, I knew it was just an escape from life. But it's a little bit more than that when I look back on reflection. As I said, I've done a lot of self-work, and I feel like it was very much so I didn't want to face up to people who asked me questions about what's next. But yeah, I was searching for something, and I was searching for what I wanted to do in life and what was going to make me a little bit more whole as a person. So the running through the desert for a whole week, was my sort of search to try and find Luke and who is Luke. And when I was out there in the desert, apart from the excruciating pain I was going through, I felt alive for the very first time in many, many years. And it might sound really strange that you're out in the middle of the desert running all day, every day for a week, and you feel alive. But the way I explain it is I felt alive because I woke up every morning and I was surrounded by like-minded people, slightly crazy people, but like-minded people who all had one purpose: get to the finishing line of that day. So I felt this massive sense of community around these 850 people who were in this race every morning. And I had a purpose every day to get to the finishing line. So I had this sense of community, I had a sense of purpose, and then I was basically in my own head, like, yes, there was people around, but I was basically in my own head for several hours every day in this beautiful surrounding, brutal, but beautiful surroundings that I'd never seen before. And I felt like I was experiencing something new. I felt like I was experiencing a different side of life that I'd never seen before. And I felt, wow, like this is what living feels like, because I hadn't been doing it for so long because I'd been injured and I wasn't being able to play the game I love and do what I'd been striving to do. So as I said, like, it was this sense of belonging, a community. I had something that I had a sense of purpose when I woke up every morning, and I felt like I was living. And it was these things that really sort of catapulted my life and what I wanted to do. And I thought, this is it. I want to do these big adventures so I can feel alive. And then on day 4 of the Marathon des Sables is when I realized something, and I realized what I've experienced in life and where I was going. It gave me a bit more direction, because after 3 days of running about 23 miles every day, you do a 52-mile run, so a double marathon. And the top 50 runners after those 3 days, which I was in the top 50 for some crazy reason out of 850 people, you start 3 hours later than the rest of the competitors. So here I am, 49 other elite athletes, raced many, many years, elite runners, some professional. They're sitting around in these tents talking to one another about what races they've done, what podiums they've been on, what races they've won, and this and that. And they get to me and they're like, what races have you done? I'm like, this is my first race. And they're like, what, ultra marathon? No, first ever race. Oh, so you're an elite marathon runner? No. You're an elite cross country runner? No.
Keep trying.
Did you used to run on the track? No. Why are you in the top 50? I'm like, I've just been running. And I gave them a bit of a backstory where I've come from. And I was inspiring these professional athletes, these elite runners, about my story. And this is where I was like, wow, like, I want to do these big adventures and I want to inspire people to start living their own life. And this started me on the trajectory of where I've been going now over these last 5 years.
Wow. And it sounds like you don't sound depressed to me. Let me put it that way. It sounds like finding your purpose and finding this sport has really turned things around for you.
Yeah, it has. And I get this all the time. You sound like, people who know me and people who talk to me, they're like, you're the most least depressing person I've ever met. And up until recently, and like about 18 months ago when I started to talk about my depression openly, it was only quite that recent, 18 months ago, when I talk about it now, I just say, yeah, I was a very good actor. I would put a face on, but on the inside, there's a lot of inner turmoil there. And I still do a lot of work and I still have down times. But I felt like for the first time post-football, I had some sense of direction and purpose, and that's helped me a lot.
Wow, incredible. So talk to us. I mean, now we've gone through the psychological health issues. Tell us about the physical health issues that you faced throughout this journey, because you went from that marathon, and I talked about it a little bit in the intro, to a much more intense 2,000 kilometer, as I called it in the intro, 12-day taste of hell on earth. And I imagine I saw the trailer for the documentary. To be honest with you, I could barely get through it. Just the expressions on your face and the stories, I almost passed out, because they're like, having your body completely fail. And tell us about that, Luke. While we're cheery and upbeat, right?
Exactly. So how all this ultra endurance stuff evolved was I got back from the desert. I'm still a bit blurry on this. I can't really remember if it was before the desert, during the desert, or immediately when I got back. I thought, I'm going to be an adventurer and I'm going to do these big challenges. I'm going to write about them. I'm going to talk about them, and I'm going to write books about them. I'm going to make a documentary about them and all this stuff to inspire people to live my life. And, my message has evolved over the last 5 years. But I thought, as an adventurer, I need to do something big. I need to do something that puts me on the map so people take me serious, because I get back from the desert, I do this race that near 1,000 people do every year, and I start calling myself an endurance adventurer. Mm-hmm. And people go, wow, that's really cool. What do you do? And I say, well, I've done the Marathon des Sables. And people go, well, 1,000 people basically do that every year. How does that make you an endurance adventurer? Well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And they're like, Yeah, okay, buddy. Let us know when you realize what you got to do when you grow up and this and that. But I stayed true, and I kept calling myself an endurance adventurer, and I kept calling myself a speaker, and I kept calling myself a writer. And as the years progressed, I basically went all in to do all these big adventures to give myself content for my brand, to train myself. I spoke at places for free. I would do writing for blogs and online magazines for free, and just really tried to evolve my message. So I did things like I cycled 18 hours nonstop. So I think it was about 260 miles
Wow.
to the beach from my house in London. And the next day learned how to surf. So learned how to surf because I was an Aussie living in London. I had no idea how to surf. So this is one adventure. Another adventure, I went out to Nepal for 6 weeks to live with some of the elite ultramarathon runners before I did the world's highest ultramarathon, which is a 42-mile run down Mount Everest, starting at base camp.
Wow.
So that was pretty hairy, pretty crazy. But that was a massive adventure, and I learned so much about life. And I did other ultramarathons. I did a double Ironman triathlon, which took me 35 hours nonstop through the hills of Wales. So all the while, I started talking to people. I'm an endurance adventurer, which is just a title I gave myself to try and grab people's attention. And they're like, wow, what do you do? And I say, well, I do these big challenges. And over the years, people stopped laughing at me when I would say it. They would actually go, wow, that's really cool. That's inspiring. And tell them a bit about my story. And, I'm here to try and inspire people to live their lives and all this stuff. And my message is evolving over time. And then in 2015, after the MDS, the Marathon des Sables, that year I created the Ultimate Triathlon by the 2,000 kilometers in 12 days that we just spoke about. And I'm going to do it in 4 years' time. And in 2015, it was time to announce it to the world. I'd only told about 10 people in the entire time because I was researching, is it possible? And I announced it at this massive big triathlon show, the biggest triathlon show in London, where I did a talk about ultra endurance triathlons, nutrition training, mental training skills, and all this type of thing. And I announced that I was going to do this big Morocco to Monaco challenge, which involved me swimming between Africa and Spain, which was the equivalent of 400 laps of a 50-meter swimming pool, cycling the southeast coast of Spain, which is the length of Britain. And then I was going to run 14 marathons in 7 days to complete the 2,000-kilometer 12-day journey from Morocco to Monaco. And about 99% of the people I spoke to at this massive triathlon show all said, yeah, you're not going to do that. So that was where the Ultimate Triathlon came from. And I spent 2015 training specifically for this event, trying to get sponsors to fund it, trying to organize a guy to film a documentary to be made, because this was a dream I had that I'm going to have someone film it and make something to show people what it was like to go through. And also, to try and understand what it takes for someone's body and mind to really push themselves every day for 12 days and see where I get with that as well.
Amazing. So what I think is actually really interesting is you started out with the goal of branding yourself, creating this story, and then, you had that mission, that purpose from the beginning. And I think that's really interesting because it sounds like that's what was driving you a lot of the time. Talk to me about the setbacks, the injuries, the hurdles, things like that.
Yeah. So being an endurance adventurer, something that you make up, it's very difficult because I made up my own job title. I made up my own career. And I came from, yes, a professional soccer background, but very different physical sides of the two sports. And now I'm trying to turn myself into an entrepreneur, a businessman. I had no background in this at all. So the biggest setbacks were people taking me seriously. I believed in myself a lot because I had to. So people not taking me seriously. And I think that can happen in all walks of life, and especially in business. And if you're an entrepreneur or a budding entrepreneur, as people go, well, that's not going to happen. So I didn't listen to people who were negative about what I was doing. No, I take that back. I did listen, but I didn't absorb it. I just listened. And if I could get some information out of their negativity, like, why do they think I can't succeed? If it was because of A, B, and C, well, can I understand what A, B, and C are to make sure that doesn't happen? And then the financial things as well, because I was still training a few people on the side, but trying to get funding and sponsorship for these type of big challenges events, because they all cost money, it was quite financially draining. And I set out on this big 5-year plan, and it's like a small business. I've had this business plan, and I'm still not making any money from all of this. I'm covering costs most days, but in my business plan, it's not until 2008, the start of 2018 is when Luke Tyburski, the endurance adventure, is going to start making money. And I'm on track, maybe a little bit ahead for that, but I had this big plan. So covering my finances, just day to living, while still believing in this dream, has been a massive setback. I've had injuries along the way, not too many, touch wood, so to speak, over the last sort of 4 years where I've done these ultra endurance things. But, I have been chronically fatigued because I've done so many big training sessions and things like this. And I broke a collarbone, I had a bike accident. And from the Ultra-Triathloner, I had a lot of ailments from when I finished. During it, I had a torn quad.
Wow.
And a hamstring, which you see a lot in the documentary. I had a shoulder injury before I went out, and I had cortisone injections just to get me through the event. But up until recently now, so, it was 10 months since finishing, I had shoulder surgery, quite extensive shoulder surgery, which was a result of the actual swim that I did from across the Gibraltar Strait from Africa to Europe. So these things are ongoing. And then there's also been my brain hasn't been functioning as per normal because I pushed myself to exhaustion 3 out of the 12 days and I shut down. My body literally stopped and collapsed. And a couple of times I went into an unconscious state. Wow. And because I was pushing my body so hard, basically what happened after a couple of months of finishing, I was waking up with really bad headaches. And I couldn't function for the morning for about 5-6 hours. Then I felt normal for about 2 hours. And then I felt exhausted for the rest of the day. And this was going on for a lot longer than it should have. So I went to see a neurologist, top neurologist in London, had scans on my head, and they said, good news is we can't find anything. And I'm not really sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing when they're scanning your brain.
Right.
But, he said, but basically what they believed happened was, because your brain's built up from these little electric signals from your central nervous system that sparks everything. And I wasn't sparking regularly and how it should. So I had to go on some medication for about, I think it was 2 months earlier on this year to try and get those sparks going. And so this is something that I've been battling with, sort of memory recall, word recall, and just, structuring of sentences in everyday life. So these are things that I've had to learn to deal with. And these are, some potential ailments and injuries and setbacks that I was willing to take going into something this big, to really show people what it's like to dream big, live your life and get out of your comfort zone and go after it, whatever that it is in your life.
Wow. And the kind of cognitive issues that you're having are as a result of the training or just kind of coincidentally?
I think it was a combination of all of I know it's a combination of all of 2015, so all of last year, because I did the event in the end. It's actually, around 12 months to the day when we're recording now to when I started it. So 2015, I announced it. I was promoting it. I was marketing it. I was getting sponsorship. I was organizing it. I was doing all the logistics. I was doing everything myself. I don't have a team. I don't have an agent. I don't have people that work for me. I was doing everything. Wow. So I was working basically 30 to 40 hours a week organizing this thing, promoting it, doing all this stuff, which sounds, quite cool, quite normal. Yeah, that's, big project and whatever. Yeah. But also I was training 25 to 30 hours physically for this event as well.
Oh my God.
So when you think 55 to 60 hours a week, people do that. People that work a lot, and I got a lot of respect for that. And it's a lot of time. You don't sleep a lot. But when 25 to 30 hours of that working week is physical exertion and you're only getting a couple of hours sleep a night, so then you get up and do it again, your body doesn't have time to recover. So throughout 2015, I was chipping away into my reserves. My stress levels were high because I wasn't getting funding. I had another dark period of depression in August, only 2 months before I started this, because I thought I was out of control. So I went back to therapy, 2 months before the biggest thing in my life, supposed to be the best time of my life, so to speak, massive big thing. And I was freaking out that I couldn't do it, that I wasn't going to make it happen. So my depression was back at its strongest at this period of time. So it's a combination of all of 2015, organising it, the battle with depression, being drained on myself physically and mentally. And then I went out and did the thing, and it was just a massive big come down and crash. And when I actually stopped, my body just went, okay, you're going to have to listen to me now, and really just shut down. So I think that's a big reason of why I got to that state physically.
I see. So let me ask a really kind of tough question here, which is, what's more challenging, the physical limitations or the non-physical limitations, the stress and the being told you can't do it, and the financial ones? Which ones really set you back the most?
In the actual challenges, like themselves, so the physical exertion challenges, the mental exertion as well, it's my physical limitations. So when you watch the documentary, and when all your listeners watch the documentary as well, which you can get at theultimatetriathlon.co and download it, you'll see that I pushed myself to my limits, kept pushing, and my body shut down.
Right.
But I acknowledged, and my crew more so, because I had a crew of 4 people, one being the filmmaker as well, they could see that my mind was willing, and I was frustrated that my body kept shutting down. So the toughest thing when I do these challenges, and it's been like this on all my big challenges when I was going 35 hours non-stop on my first ever triathlon, and to this date my only ever official triathlon, it's my mind is so much stronger than my physical body, which is, and now I know this, is a rarity. Most people will give up mentally before their body does. But I'm the total other way around. My mind is so strong, and I've trained it to be this way, and I've developed this mindset that I can push my body to its limits, keep pushing it, and then it basically shuts down, which happens 3 of the 12 days. So that's the toughest part for me, is my physical limitations when I do these big challenges. Wow. But outside of that, it's sort of a combination of the physical and mental challenges, because there's only so many hours in a day, and when I become unbalanced, so when I do too little or when I do too much, is when my depression starts to build back up. So I'm trying to find this balance, this ongoing balance. This could be on a daily basis, a weekly basis, monthly or yearly. It's almost like, well, if I say, okay, I need some time, some downtime because I've been, quite productive, I've had some big days recently. If I shut down too far, then it becomes detrimental. But at the same time, when I'm flat out busy, I don't try and use the word busy these days. I like to think of it, I'm being productive. And if I'm not being productive, then I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing, whether that's too little or too much. And I get into this out of control state, which then all of a sudden my depression rears up and just sort of flips me back into a depressive state. So I've got to find that balance. So when I'm not doing the big physical challenges, it's the mental thought process to trying to maintain this life, work, mental clarity, balance to keep me in the best possible frame of mind that I can be in.
Incredible. So I want to transition, Luke, into, you've definitely wowed the audience. I want to start to understand how much of this training that you've done to increase your discipline and really your threshold for pain and suffering and setback, how much do you think can be learned by anyone out there in the audience? And how much do you think is just, you're a tough son of a
I think there's definitely parts of the latter in there. And I think it was partially my upbringing with my family, because this is something I love talking about. We grew up with this image on our fridge, our family fridge. I had one sister, mother and father, very loving, very caring environment that I grew up in. But it was always this thing that we always look at. It was like a stork or a pelican and there was this frog inside its mouth, and you couldn't see it. All you could see was its arms sticking out of the pelican's mouth, and its mouth's closed, and this frog's arms are gripping the pelican's neck like it's trying to wring its neck and literally rip its head off. And the pelican's just got this sort of look on its face, and the caption is, "Never give up." And I sort of feel like that shaped me as a person growing up, because I would see this every day, and whenever things were tough, my mum would always refer to this caption and always say, "Remember the frog." So I think part of it is that I grew up in that way, and I'm just, a tough guy, but also I think it's partially in my makeup as well. But I think to create a very strong mindset and to be able to achieve these, not just physical feats, but anything, like we can go through really, really tough times in life, in relationships, in business, and that's your ultimate triathlon. It might be your business. So developing strong mindsets, I believe that you can really enhance your mental strength. And the key things that I think about to develop this is knowing why you're doing what you're doing. Because if you understand this, when it gets to the tough times, then you can look back on, okay, why am I actually doing this? And if your why is strong enough, it'll help you move forward. So first and foremost, having clarity in the reason why you're doing this is huge. And the second big thing, and the thing that I always go like, I guess you could say I live my life by this, is don't be afraid to fail.
Love that.
And this is my take on failure. People think failure as a negative. And yes, it can be, but I think it can be a huge positive if you add something after when you fail or when you don't complete something. And that's reflection. So failure with reflection of the experience that you had equals knowledge, because you understand why you failed. If you didn't understand why you failed, then that reflection hasn't been wasted, but there'll be some key element there that you understood. Okay, I didn't understand why I failed, but I know now not to go down that route. So that's still knowledge, and you can use this to understand how you want to try and move forward. So it gets this whole, for me, and this is big in endurance sport, but it can be big in business. And it's, so don't be afraid to fail. So when you fail, have some reflection. And then once you've got that reflection from the experience and you've gained that knowledge, persevere with what you're trying to do. Now, this flips into something that I hear in business all the time, and you hear top international speakers and life coaches and things like this say, fail fast. Especially in entrepreneurs, fail fast. So here's something for you and your listeners to think about. Fail fast, fail fast. Yeah, I get it. And I'm not saying don't fail fast. But where does grit and perseverance come in if you're constantly failing fast? There's no room for grit and perseverance. So this is my take on it. Go in, and if you fail, before you throw it to the wayside and go, okay, fail fast and move on, have some reflection. And then go, okay, I understand why I did this. This is not for me. Yeah, okay, this is the time where I fail fast. But don't just do this every time. If you try something and you fail, reflect on it. Okay, let's suss this out a little bit. Okay, actually, no, I think this has got some legs, so I'm going to persevere. I'm going to show a bit of grit. And Angela Duckworth, someone who is amazing, and she's the foreleader of researching grit, her loose translation that hopefully I don't botch of grit is passion and perseverance for a long time. So fail, have some reflection of why or what it is that you failed with and how you're doing it. And then if you think, actually, no, I think I'm on the right track, I just need to change my direction, persevere, show a bit of grit. And then if it's not working out and you start to fail again, reflect a little bit more. Actually, no, I need to tweak it a little bit more. Let's try and show a bit more grit and persevere and go through this. And then it comes to a point where, okay, this didn't work. Okay, now I have to throw this to the wayside and go back again. And people might say, well, if you just failed fast, it didn't work this time. But the flip side of that is, what if you persevered and showed a bit of grit with this one idea or with this way of thinking, and after a period of time, this was your big aha moment. This was the big break that you needed, and you've been successful in whatever that means because you've showed a bit of grit and you've persevered. You failed a lot, but you had reflection and you got to that point. So I guess, the message I'm trying to say is don't always just go, well, I'm going to try this and fail fast and then get rid of it. Make sure before you discard whatever it is you're trying to do, you reflect on that failure and understand why. And if you think, actually, I just need to tweak it a little bit and move forward, persevere and show a bit of grit before you actually get rid of it.
I love that. I want to remind the audience of the first thing you said, which is definitely starting with why and having clear reasoning, having an end goal in mind. And then also, I have to admit, I'm guilty of, I have a lecture that I give often on failing harder and failing faster and why failure is the methodology for entrepreneurial success. And I think you're right. I think all of us who use that adage and talk about that often fail to throw in but make sure you're failing forward and learning from every single failure. So I think that's a really big takeaway for the audience, not just for entrepreneurship or sports, but really for anything, for social life, for your professional life. I think it's a really, really wise lesson to reframe the way you look at failure and see it as an opportunity to learn very effectively and not an afterthought of, well, at least I learned.
Yeah, exactly. You just said you can put it in all facets of life. And my last big thing about developing a mindset and helping you move forward, sort of the big key factors for me is make sure you've got a tribe or community around you. And this can really help you dig deeper into yourself to understand that why and not be afraid to fail because you've got this community around you. And I think having that culture of like-minded people that are maybe a little bit further along in the journey of what you're trying to do than you, someone who maybe is a little bit on a similar journey, and also someone who maybe you can help, because I think you can learn so much from helping others who are trying to do a similar journey to you. Learn from people who are on a similar level, but then also learn from someone who's been there and done that and learn a few of the ways. So developing that tribe and that community around you, I think, is very beneficial to developing a mindset to be so strong to help you achieve the goals, and also a network of people where you can bounce ideas off, or just to make yourself accountable to yourself, because you've got other people who are around you doing great things or trying to help you out. And I think this is very important.
Definitely. Those are lessons that definitely bear repeating, is making sure you have the support network and the mentorship. Luke, I want to ask you a lot of questions. I can't believe we've already elapsed as much time as we have, but are there any other kind of day-to-day skills, habits, and routines that you feel make you able to perform at such a higher level? I mean, are you meditating? Do you have a very specific nutritional regimen? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so there's a few things that I try and do on a daily basis. I'm human, I'm like everyone else, and I failed to live up to my own expectations a lot of the time. The things I do every day is I eat real food. So I'm a real food cook. I have a couple of cooking ebooks on my website, luketyburski.com, and I teach confidence in the kitchen. I do a lot of baking and making things like this. It's a passion of mine. So people say, well, what do you mean you only eat real food? I don't really know how else to explain it. I don't eat anything processed. So if it's got a long ingredients list, I don't touch it. I eat a lot of vegetables. I eat some meat, not a lot. The meat that I do eat is I buy from the best possible source as I can. And yeah, it's just all natural food, and I eat very little sugar, next to no sugar. Just a little bit of fruit, because I've had a few stomach issues over the years, and that's my own journey. Not that there's anything wrong with fruit, but I try and keep my sugar down just to enough. And eating real food helps me. It makes me feel good, makes me recover well for when I do these big challenges and ventures. And also it keeps my head feeling clear, so I can work hard and achieve things I want to achieve. I've been practicing mindfulness / meditation for many years, unknowingly, since I was a 15-year-old kid playing at elite level soccer. I started mindfulness training with the representative team that I was in. I had no idea what it was at the time, but I got right into it, and I've been continuing that throughout my life. It was only up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago that I actually came across more mindfulness practices and meditative practices, and the Headspace app, mindfulness app, which is amazing. If you don't know what it is, check it out.
Fantastic app.
It's a really good guide for people who are just trying to get a bit more clarity and have a bit more energy and understand a few more things about themselves and how they can be more productive. I feel it's very helpful. And I was like, wow, like this mindfulness stuff, I've been doing this for over half my life now. So this is pretty cool. So I like to, but I have different takes, and I don't just use the app. I do mindfulness walking, where sometimes I'll just try and switch off and just walk for a period of time without thinking about anything and just really get in touch with my senses. So I'll smell, I'll try and, sniff the air a lot, and I'll listen, not just the things that are around me, but the sounds that are further away, and just really try and do that as well. And the other type of a mindfulness practice that I do is I'll try and sit and stop, even if it's just for like 5 breaths, take big breaths, or just sit there and stop at a period of time, because very rarely do we ever just stop today. There's so many things going on. And I don't mean stop and play with your phone, or I don't mean stop and drink a cup of coffee. I mean stop and do nothing and just try and engage in where you are. So if you are in a coffee shop, then, look at everything around you, acknowledge the location you're in, the sounds, the smells, and things like this. And you can do this for 5 minutes. And I think something like this really resets me. So I try and do this on a daily basis, sometimes a couple of times a day, depending on what I'm doing. And they're the things that I really try and think about. And the final thing, and this is very important, and it's very difficult in this day and age, is everyone wants to go 100% every day and achieve all of their to-do lists every single day that they make up. If they've got 10 things on it, they've got to hit 10. If they get 11, that's even better. So we want to have this, to put it in a little bit more, like a better way to understand it, we want to achieve a 10 out of 10 day every day. That's our perfect life, and that's what we think we need to do to be productive, to move forward in business, to move forward in life, relationships, everything. But what if you wake up one morning and you're only feeling like a 4 out of 10? What do? Do you plow through it? Do you stop? Most people just go, oh, I've just got to get all this stuff done. So from my experience with dealing with mental health, dealing with my physical training, and also now that I'm an entrepreneur on my business side of things in life, I realized if we keep plowing and try and get these 10 out of 10 days when we're only feeling 4 out of 10, this is where things like burnout, chronic fatigue, and just you make mistakes and you're not as productive as you should be. You're more busy. I think that like playing a longer game, and if you feel like a 4 out of 10 day, then aim for 4 out of 10, but make sure you give 100% of your energy for that 4 out of 10 level. And if you keep doing this over a longer period of time, I feel you're going to be more productive and achieve more things than being busy. Because if you'll wake up one morning and you're feeling 4 out of 10 and you try and smash yourself into an 8 out of 10, over time, you're going to have some sort of burnout. You're going to have some sort of mental fog, and you may make mistakes, which is going to cost you time, money, or relationships or something like this. So then you're going to have to stop, reset, take a longer period of time off. But the people who actually listen to their 4 out of 10 state, lower the expectations of that day, that month, or whatever it is, and slowly chip away at it, at that goal, I feel in a longer term foresight that you will be much better and have a more balanced life, less stress, better success, and all these type of things. And that's my take on, if you feel 4 out of 10 that day, smash 4 out of 10 and call it a day.
I think that's so great. And I think both of those things that you said tie in really well. One is, having the presence and the self-awareness from a regular mindfulness practice to where you can observe your thoughts and you're present enough in your body to say, hey, I woke up really, feeling angry and feeling this, as opposed to just being in that emotion and being pissed off or whatever it might be. And then the second piece, which is holding space for that and kind of respecting yourself. And this is something I really have only recently learned, is do you respect yourself enough to just allow yourself to have that day and not beat yourself up about it? And this is something I certainly have had to learn, like waking up and being like, you know what, I'm just going to get through this one, episode today, or I'm going to get through this one thing today. and then, I'm just going to go read my book. And I think that's such an important takeaway.
Yeah, it is. And you hit the nail on the head, having respect for yourself to be able to do that. And I was in LA recently for my Ultimate Triathlon documentary screening. I had a screening over in LA, and while I was over there, I met with many different people, many different brands and things to talk about collaboration in the future. And I was invited out to USC's football practice on a Thursday before they went away and played in the games as from their communications and player development liaison. And I was talking about basically this sort of type of stuff, and I was talking, making sure, if you're out on 4 out of 10 day, aim for 4 out of 10. And he said to me, okay, well, that's cool, but what if you need a 10 out of 10 day? So it's game day, right, for one of these kids. It's game day, they need to be a 10 out of 10. And if you wake up because of whatever reason, you had a fight with a girlfriend, you couldn't sleep that night, you had an upset stomach, something you ate, anything like this as an athlete, what do you do then? And this is a valid point. And I smiled because I said to him, you already know the answer. He says, what do you mean? I said, that's when you rely on your tribe. So all of this stuff I've been speaking about, it all, and as you just said, it all like interlinks. So if you have a big meeting that day and you wake up and you're only on a 4 out of 10 day and you go, wow, like, I don't know how I'm going to pull through this. That's when you lean on that tribe that you've created and go, hey, can I pull you into this meeting because I'm just struggling a little bit with whatever? Can I pull you in and you help me get through this meeting so we can help the company move forward, or we can make that deal, or we can get that sponsorship? You pull your teammates together if you're on the defense of the American football team, and you go, guys, like, I'm having this little twinge here. What do you think? Like, coach, I'm struggling here. Mm-hmm. Do you still want me to play, or should I be replaced? Like, it's a big thing to do, but that's why you build a tribe around you of people, of like-minded people who have your best interests at heart. So when you are struggling and you're only feeling a 4 out of 10, but on this given day, you need to be on point. You need to be on game. You need to do a 10 out of 10 day. You lean on this tribe and this community and you say, this is all I've got. What do you think? How can you help me out? Let's get through this together so we can move forward and then get on to the next day. So that's very important as well.
Fantastic. So Luke, I know we're coming up on time here. I want to give you an opportunity to let the audience know where they can find you, reach out to you, learn more about you, and of course, check out the documentary.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I have a website, luketyburski.com, where you can find everything from free recipes to download cooking ebooks. If you want to book me as a speaker, you can go through luketyburski.com. You can hear all about my adventures from the marathon to subs. There's a nice 20-minute video to show my experience there. My Luke Learns to Surf journey, there's another video there. My Nepal trip, loads of cool photos and things like this. So all luketyburski.com, you can see all the videos for everything I've done and achieved. The Ultimate Triathlon, there's some information on that as well. But if you want to know some more specific things about the Ultimate Triathlon, you can go to theultimatetriathlon.co and you can watch the trailer. And when you watch the trailer, there's a option to rent or buy the film via Vimeo, and it's called the Ultimate Triathlon Documentary. And if you want to get in touch with me via social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube at Luke Tyburski, and come say hi. I'm a real person. I reply to all my own social media, do all of that. And if you've got any questions that you want to ask me from this conversation, my email address or there's a contact form on my website, get in touch and go for it. And let's connect. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that your listeners have.
Awesome, brother. Thanks so much. I want to ask you one last question before we close, and that is, if people take away just one message from this episode and they carry it with them for the rest of their lives, what would you hope for that message to be?
I've got a quote that I'm going to give, which goes back to the first point I made. And the quote is, clarity is the eternal energy that fuels your dreams.
Love it.
That quote basically means if you understand your why and you know why you're doing what you're doing, then when you're in the trenches and you're really struggling with to try and achieve that what you are trying to achieve, if you're so clear on that vision, you're so clear on why you're doing what you're doing, then that clarity will be energy to keep you moving forward at a time where you feel like I have no idea how I'm going to achieve what it is I'm trying to achieve.
Fantastic. Luke Tyburski, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and such a huge dose of inspiration today and energy that I think the audience is definitely going to take away from this episode. So thanks again. And I definitely learned quite a bit.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to connecting with some of your listeners who get in touch. And thoughts on the Ultimate Triathlon documentary would be great. So drop a comment on Vimeo or get in touch with me and let me know what you think of the documentary.
Awesome. Will do. All right, Luke, take care and let's keep in touch.
All right, Jonathan. Thanks a lot.
See ya. All right, super friends, that's it for this week's episode. We hope you really, really enjoyed it and learned a ton of applicable stuff that can help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If so, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you found this podcast. In addition to that, we are always looking for great guest posts on the blog or awesome guests right here on the podcast. So if you know somebody or you are somebody or you have thought of somebody who would be a great fit for the show or for our blog, please reach out to us either on Twitter or by email. Our email is info@becomingasuperhuman.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.